Chapter 25. We returned to the boot stall at exactly 3 o'clock. Nothing so far had gone according to plan, but now with El Plumero, I allowed myself to feel a small bit of hope. Maybe things would go the way Don Clemente had intended. Finally. The iron grill had been pulled down and locked up tight. Javi rattled the metal with both hands. Elena poked her nose through the grating and peered into the darkness. I pulled at both of the giant padlocks. "Where is he?" Elena asked anxiously. "He said 3 o'clock. Do you think he's not coming?" "Calm down, Elena," I replied. "He'll be here. He is probably just running late. We will wait. At least it is cooler in here." It was a relief to escape the afternoon heat. Javier sank down onto the concrete floor and leaned against the metal grill. He closed his eyes, pulled his ankle toward him, and rubbed it carefully. He probed the area above the ankle bone, grimacing slightly. Elena looked at him with concern. She sat down next to him, cross-legged, and motioned for him to prop up his ankle on her knee. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out the pamphlet. She thumbed through the pages, scanning the contents. "Listen to this," Elena said. "This is what happens if you do not drink enough water out in the desert." I leaned over to check out danger signs of dehydration. "Irritability. Angers easily," she read. "That's one of the first things to watch for." Elena gave me a little grin. "I finally know what's wrong with you. It looks like you have been dehydrated your whole life, Miguel." I grabbed the pamphlet out of her hands and read the next warning sign aloud. "Confusion. Makes irrational decisions." "What? Is this whole thing about you?" I teased back. Elena poked me in the ribs and yanked the paper out of my hands. "Oh, yeah? Well, just look what it says next," she began. "He's here," Javi interrupted. He was looking down the long corridor of stalls. Striding toward us, head high, was El Plumero. "Come, we're running late," our coyote commanded. He motioned for us to follow him. He unlocked the grating and pulled it up. As we stepped inside the boot stall, he quickly slammed the grating back down and locked it up tight. Then he moved to the back of the stall toward the shelves of boots and reached under the lowest shelf. I heard a small click, and a small section of the shelves swung out. We walked through the opening, squeezing into the room behind the stall. The secret door closed. One dull light bulb revealed a small storeroom stuffed from floor to ceiling with survival gear, organized by category. "Here, try these." El Plumero shoved a pair of light but well-made synthetic hiking boots into my hand. I kicked off my worn-out sneakers and replaced my filthy, stinky socks with new, thick ones. The new boots fit perfectly. Elena tried on several pairs before she found ones she liked. Javier selected a high-topped pair. He laced them, stood up, and took several steps. He limped only a little. He nodded to himself and muttered, "These will do." El Plumero gave us new pants, hats, and bandanas, 2 shirts to layer, and waterproof jackets, all in light colors. We each got a backpack stocked with raisins and packets of brown sugar, a small first aid kit, and a tarp. Mostly, though, the backpacks held as much water as we could carry. El Plumero was a professional. He knew what he was doing. Nothing was left to chance. No wonder Don Clemente's fees were so high. No wonder they said he had never lost a single person. "We leave now," El Plumero announced. "We have a full moon tonight. We need to take advantage of that." I reached into my pocket and pulled out our remaining money. "Here, take this. It's all we have left." "We'll have plenty of time to take care of that later." El Plumero did not touch the money. "I'm taking you myself. Don Clemente said I was to take special care of you. This is the last thing I will do for him." He looked at us hard. "It is at least 2 long nights of walking, perhaps more. It depends on your stamina, the weather, la migra, the police. Many, many things can happen in the desert. Most of them are unpleasant." "We'll take a new route to the west," El Plomero continued. "There is too much surveillance, too many other problems to the east. The new route is longer than the eastern one. It will be very difficult. If you are not able to withstand the heat and other hardships, you will not make it." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I am giving you one last opportunity to reconsider. You can turn around and go back home now." Again, he waited. Our silence filled up the little room. Did he really expect that we would back out? He didn't know what we had come through, and I was not about to give up yet. Elena was even more stubborn. And Javi? He had never turned around. Never. This would be his only chance. "You're like everyone else," El Plomero said. His warnings had not changed our minds one bit. "Everyone believes they will make it, and of course you must have faith. It's the only way to enter the wilderness." He turned and opened a door that led to an alley outside. We piled ourselves and our gear into a dirty white pickup truck. Elena and El Plomero sat in front with the driver. Javi and I sat in the back. For maybe an hour and a half, we headed west along a dirt road. The driver swerved to avoid the worst of the potholes, but Javi and I flew up and down on the hard metal of the truck bed. The road gave way to a faint dirt track that ended abruptly at the edge of a dry gully. We got out and stretched. The driver pulled plastic jugs from the toolbox in the truck bed and thrust them into our hands. We took long swigs of warm water, as much as we could, before the truck headed back to town. A large trail of dust marked its slow passage east. The sun had set, but the heat of the day still rose up from the sand under our feet. We adjusted our bootlaces and backpack straps for comfort. My shoulders ached, and we had not taken a single step. The water was heavy. Really, really heavy. I had carried enough agua, or water, and San Jacinto for the corn to know that soon it would feel like I was hauling around a load of bricks. Javi hefted his own pack higher on his shoulders and tightened the belt at his waist. I could not see that it had made any difference. The weight just seemed to settle down low again, as if the water were pulling him toward the center of the earth. He grunted, tugged at the pack again, and cinched the shoulder straps even tighter. Sweat poured down his face, too much for the effort he was making. El Plomero checked his own pack. He shifted some contents, reached into Elena's pack, took out 3/4 of her water, and put it in his. "I can carry it, Plomero," Elena insisted. "I want to do my share." "No, you can't. You'll slow us down. We cannot wait for you." El Plomero squared his shoulders. "Me llamo Moises," he added quietly. "You can call me Moises." With that, he faced north and began scrambling down the rocky slope into the gully. "Vámonos! Let's go," he commanded. "There's no time to waste. I set the pace." He had made his way across the wash and up the other side before we had even taken one step. "Keep up! No one can afford to wait for anybody." Moises's voice echoed across the emptiness. "We wait for no one." Chapter 26. The desert stretched out on all sides of us, flat and immense. We had unlimited space, but we walked single file behind Moises. First Javi, then Elena, then me. Moises hiked at a fast, steady pace. He stopped now and then to check his bearings. In the fading twilight and then in the rising light of the moon, it was easy to see. Perhaps 2 hours into the hike, we paused briefly. Moises gave us raisins and a few almonds. Between bites, he gave us a lecture on basic survival. Unfortunately, this is the hottest time of the year, so do not talk more than you need to, even at night. It uses up moisture. Drink before you are thirsty. If you wait, it will be too late. Never take off any of your clothes. You lose water twice as fast if you are not covered up. We have just enough water to make it if everything goes perfectly. Do not go anywhere without your pack. It has everything you need to survive. For a while, anyway. I did not need to ask Moises to repeat any of it. It was easy to learn something when it matters to you. Javi nodded as if he already knew most of what Moises said. Watch where you sit and where you walk, especially at night. Scorpions and rattlesnakes will be out, just like us, Moises continued. Do not sit on the ground in the sun during the day. Sit above the ground. Even a meter up, it may be 10 to 20 degrees cooler. Take care of your feet. They are the only way to get out of here. So we had a whole new set of enemies here. The sun, the heat, the animals. We could stay for a short time only. If we stayed longer, we would pay with our lives. Of course, there's always La Migra, the police, to worry about, Moises said. But here, in this section, once we cross the border, it is the militia we need to look out for. Ranchers have their own armies, equipped with uniforms and guns, and hatred for us. Moises turned his back to us and began to walk once again. He had long legs and took big steps. With my own height, I could match him, stride for stride. Elena had to take almost 2 steps for every one of Moises's. Javi was somewhere in between. Moises did not look back to see where we were. He kept up the same relentless pace. I fell into the rhythm of the hike. I daydreamed about the end, the very end, my homecoming in California. Papa would hug me and not let me go. He would ask for my forgiveness. He would say he had made a big mistake by making me wait. Mama would cry and hold my hand and offer up small, grateful prayers to God. Papa would crack open a beer and hand it to me, and no one would say I was too young. They would beg me to tell them everything. Javi and Moises, Camilo, Capitan Morales, all would figure into the story, but I would be the main character. I would, of course, give Elena some credit, and I would have a big heart. I would not blame Elena for any of the trouble she got us into. Elena would tell everyone how I saved us both. I replayed this fantasy 100 times in my mind. I was so deep into my thoughts that I did not notice that I was now third in line. Moises, Elena, then me. I looked back over my shoulder. Javier had fallen behind. Way behind. He straightened up and walked evenly just as I turned to look. We stopped twice more. The second time, just as pale gold and pink tinted the eastern horizon. It took Javi more than 5 minutes to catch up to us. Moises frowned, checked the ground around us, and spread a tarp for us to sit on. We drank the small rations of water that he allowed us. I wasn't hungry, but he insisted that we eat small portions of the energy bars. We move again in 10 minutes, Moises announced. 2 or 3 more hours, then we will stop for the hottest part of the day. Javier, come with me. Moises motioned for Javier to follow him. They moved out of our hearing distance, but they didn't need to have bothered. We could guess what was being said. Moises pointed at Javi's ankle, and Javi shrugged, then raised his hands, palms up. Really, I could imagine him saying, it's just a small sprain. I'll be fine again once we rest. Then Moises turned his back to us. He wanted to be sure we could not read his lips. But there were other things to read. I could hear the harsh tone of Moises's words. I could see his stiff back, his shaking head. It was not hard to understand what Moises meant when his hands and fingers pointed first back toward Elena and me, and then toward the rocky ground and the mountains that rose in the distance in front of us. The conversation might as well have been written out in the red sand at our feet or across the pale blue of the morning sky. He doesn't know Javi like we do, does he, Miguel? Elena said. Moises does not know how strong Javi is. I was silent. I did not know if I should say what she wanted to hear or what I thought she needed to hear. ¿Qué piensas, Miguel? I want to know what you think. Really, I do, Elena pleaded. Well, I think you're right, I replied. Javi is strong. He's going to make it. I could not see how telling the truth would help Elena make it out of this desert. She needed to believe that the three of us would survive together. Besides, what was the truth about Javi? He had surprised me again and again with what he could do, with what he knew. He had made it this far. Why not all the way? Relief flooded her face. A single tear made its way down through the dirt on her cheek. Oh, gracias, Miguel. We can only make it together. I just know it. She leaned over and kissed my cheek. Javi and Moises made their way back to us. Moises kicked at the sand grimly, his eyes fixed on the ground. Javi had put on his best smile, but there was pain in his eyes. Hey, you two, guess what? Guess what Moises told me, he said excitedly. We are here. We are already here. I looked around, confused. What do you mean? We're in the middle of the desert. We are not anywhere. No, no, Javi said. We are here. We crossed La Linea, La Frontera, sometime in the night. Javi stretched out his arms as if to embrace the idea. Don't you see? We made it! We all looked at the desolation that surrounded us. There was nothing but scrub brush and a single tailless lizard skittering across the sand toward the safety of a rock. I began to laugh first, then Elena and Javi. His big donkey laugh echoed across the desert. Moises grinned. Soon we were laughing out loud. We laughed until our stomachs hurt, and we could not laugh any more. I laughed so hard that I cried. It was crazy. I had arrived at the very place I always wanted to be, across La Linea in El Norte, but I was in the middle of nowhere. Had I come this far to feel just like I did in San Jacinto? To be somewhere and nowhere at the same time? To belong and be lost at the same time? We fell silent. The tension had lifted. Elena sighed almost contentedly. Moises set himself to the task of charting our course, and Javi stood next to him, closely studying the landmarks that Moises pointed out. I always thought I'd know exactly the moment I crossed the border, I admitted, folding up the tarp. I thought I would feel it somehow. But I didn't even know. I had no idea. How could I not have felt something? Moises, who had most likely crossed the border dozens of times, just shrugged. And with that, he walked off toward the north at an even faster pace than before.